You spend a year rebuilding a boat and think it'll bring you peace. Something steady, something yours. That's what Blue Raven was to me. More than fiberglass and sails. It was healing, quiet, earned. So when a neighbor I barely tolerated decided to take it for a spin without permission, without sense, that piece shattered like a hull against a buoy. She called it a protest. I called it theft, and the Coast Guard. They called it a federal crime. This isn't just a story about a stolen boat. It's a story about boundaries, consequences, and what happens when someone live streams their way into a courtroom. There's something sacred about silence on the water. That morning, I stood at the edge of Dock C in Charleston's Cooper Bay Marina, coffee in hand, the sun barely skimming the rooftops. It was the kind of morning you don't take for granted, the kind that makes you breathe slower. The bay was glassy, reflecting the soft haze of the harbor like a painting too perfect to touch. My boat, Blue Raven, sat waiting, clean restored and finally mine again. I'd spent over a year rebuilding her hull wiring paint. Every inch of that boat carried my fingerprint, and more than that, my peace. After the divorce, after leaving the Navy, I needed something I could fix with my own hands. Blue Raven wasn't just fiberglass and screws. She was what kept me from sinking. So when I saw Levi, the dockhand, sprinting toward me, eyes wide, hands flailing like a man trying to flag down a fire truck, I knew something was wrong. "Max," he yelled, breathless. "Your boat, it's gone." I blinked. Gone. She just took it. Woman, blonde. Said she had permission. A cold weight dropped in my chest. What woman? He hesitated. The one who's always talking about equity and stuff with the flyers. My stomach twisted. "No, Stephanie," he nodded, sheepish. "Yeah. She said you were running late and asked us to untie it for her. I didn't." I mean, she sounded real confident. Of course she did. Stephanie Monroe lived 3 slips down from me in a small houseboat called Collective Dream. She was a social equity educator, according to her email signature, and a loud one, always preaching about how marinas should be shared public spaces and how ownership was a capitalist illusion. At first, she was just a nuisance handing out pamphlets, lecturing tourists about fossil fuels. But I never thought she'd actually steal my boat. We pulled up the marina's surveillance feed, and there she was, clear as day, wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat and aviators, like some dollar store Jackie. Oh, Stephanie calmly climbed aboard. Blue Raven started the engine and sailed out like it was her morning routine. My jaw clenched. This has to be a joke. She said it was a community resource moment. Levi added, almost apologetic. Said she was making a statement. A statement. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram, praying I was wrong. I wasn't. There, she was live streaming from my boat. "Hey friends, today I'm reclaiming unused resources for the people. If billionaires can float their toys, why can't we?" The comments were exploding. Some were cheering her on, others weren't as kind. And then, on the stream, she looked into the camera and said, "Let's take this protest all the way around the bay." I didn't wait another second. I hit dial on the Coast Guard emergency line. "Coast Guard Charleston, what's your emergency? My boat's been stolen. Do you have a visual?" "Yes," I said. "She's currently live streaming the theft." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, did you say live streaming names Blue Raven, white and navy 26-foot cruiser?" "The woman at the helm doesn't have a license. She doesn't even know how to dock. I need her stopped before she gets herself or someone else hurt. We're dispatching a patrol unit now. Please remain at the marina." I hung up and leaned against a piling jaw, tight, heart pounding. I could barely hear Levi asking if I was okay. I wasn't. She didn't just steal a boat. She took something I'd built from the wreckage of my life and turned it into her soapbox. And the worst part, I had a sinking feeling this was only the beginning. The moment I hung up with the Coast Guard, the marina changed. The stillness was gone. Word had already started to spread. Boaters wandered to the edge of the docks, phones in hand, pointing toward the horizon. Some were laughing, others squinting confused. "Is that Max's boat?" I didn't answer. I was too busy watching the live stream. Stephanie had gone full performance mode. She stood at the helm, arms wide like she was hosting a TED Talk. We're not stealing. We're reclaiming. This boat was sitting idle for months. Think of how many families could be out here enjoying the ocean if we just let go of this capitalist gatekeeping. The chat was chaotic. You're amazing, bro. You're going to jail. Is this satire? Behind her, the coastline drifted further away. The engine roared louder as she pushed past the 5-knot zone, completely ignoring the no-wake signs that lined the inner harbor. My boat wasn't built for high speed. She was pushing it too hard. I could feel it. And so could the Coast Guard. A faint siren wailed in the distance. Then another. I stepped up onto the fuel dock, scanning the water, until I saw the flashing lights slicing across the channel. A small response vessel. They were fast closing the gap within minutes. But Stephanie wasn't slowing down. She shouted over her shoulder to her phone camera, "They can't stop an idea. They can't arrest the future." Then she cranked the wheel, too hard. The boat lurched violently to the side, sending a crate of life vests tumbling overboard. Wake splashed up the bow as Blue Raven tilted over. Corrected and slammed back down. With a bone-rattling thud, one of the Coast Guard boats hailed her on the loudspeaker. "This is the U.S. Coast Guard. Cut your engine. Prepare to be boarded." But Stephanie just waved like she was in a parade. "We're being suppressed," she cried. "Let them try." I wasn't sure if she was delusional or just that deep into the role she'd cast for herself. A familiar voice pulled me back. "You okay, man?" It was Chris, camera in hand, breathless with his drone controller slung around his neck. His feed was already broadcasting to his YouTube channel. "Been filming since she left the slip," he added. "This thing's gonna hit 1 million views by sundown." "I don't care about views," I said, though. Part of me knew it didn't matter anymore. This was out there. This was public. I turned back toward the water, just in time to see the moment everything cracked. Stephanie attempted a turn near a marker buoy, one that designated the start of a protected coral restoration zone. Whether she didn't see it or didn't care, she aimed Blue Raven straight at it. Boom! The sound hit the docks like a gunshot. The hull crunched against the buoy with a shuddering metallic groan. Stephanie slammed forward into the console. The camera flew from her hand. The feed cut to black gasps echoed across the dock. I could feel something break inside me. That was my boat. The Coast Guard didn't wait. They boarded fast, 2 officers jumping aboard, securing the throttle, cutting power. Stephanie was dazed, but still moving, still talking. She tried to explain. Then she tried to yell. Then she started crying. This wasn't theft. I meant well. I was just trying to prove a point. From the dock, I watched her get cuffed. Her hat was gone. Her sunglasses cracked. Her voice hoarse from all the shouting. She looked less like a revolutionary now, and more like someone waking up from a bad dream, right into a legal nightmare. One of the officers radioed in, voice flat. "We've got the suspect in custody. Vessel is damaged. Standing by for tow." Chris zoomed in with the drone. "Got it all," he muttered. "Every second, from protest to arrest." I nodded. Not because I wanted to see her suffer, but because this was accountability. You don't get to steal something, put lives at risk, and call it a message. And you definitely don't get to crash someone else's future and expect applause. By the time Stephanie was escorted off Blue Raven, a crowd had gathered at the marina. People were filming, whispering, laughing nervously, like they weren't sure if this was performance art or a breakdown. Stephanie was still talking. It wasn't a crime. It was symbolic. This whole country was built on protest. The officer beside her didn't flinch. "Ma'am, you crashed a private vessel into federal waters and endangered other boaters. They'll thank me one day." I watched from the fuel dock, arms crossed, teeth grinding. My boat. My beautiful, hand-restored Blue Raven was being towed back like a wounded soldier. The side panel was cracked open. The propeller was visibly bent. This was beyond protest. This was damage. Real expensive mine. Chris came up beside me. "Man, your live stream hit 2 million. I didn't respond. I wasn't here for the numbers. I was here because I had to be. Because I knew this wouldn't just go away. The next few days were a blur. Statements to the Coast Guard insurance claims. Paperwork calls from local reporters. Apparently, a marina Marxist hijacks boat for social justice ride makes for good headlines, especially when it ends with a crash and a Coast Guard takedown. Stephanie. She was charged with unauthorized use of a marine vessel, reckless endangerment, navigational violations in protected waters, and interfering with law enforcement on the water. She was released on bail the next morning, and then she went viral. Not in the way she wanted. Clips from her live stream flooded social media. Edits, memes, remixes. Someone auto-tuned her line, "They can't arrest the future," into a club track. It hit 1 million plays in 48 hours. She tried to spin it, calling herself a misunderstood activist. But the internet wasn't buying it. The final blow came when her own nonprofit dropped her, releasing a statement that her actions do not reflect the values of safe, lawful advocacy. Days later, I saw her again. She was assigned community service at the marina, scrubbing docks, collecting trash. Sunglasses on, hoodie pulled low. She walked fast, head down. But people still recognized her. They always did. She spotted me while I was checking the repairs on Blue Raven. Her eyes narrowed, then softened. She walked over slowly, holding a bucket of tools. "You really pressing charges?" She asked, quieter than I'd ever heard her speak. "I already did," I said. "And the Coast Guard added a few of their own," she scoffed. But there was no heat behind it. It wasn't supposed to go that far. "You hijacked a boat, Stephanie." It was a message, she murmured. "No," I said, shaking my head. "It was a stunt, and now you're the punchline." She looked away. For a moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then, I remembered the terrified kayakers, the dented hull, the way she waved at the Coast Guard, like they were her opening act. "You damaged something important to me," I said quietly. "Not just property peace." She didn't argue. "I'll pay for it," she muttered. "You will," I replied. "But that won't fix the reputation you destroyed for yourself." She walked off, bucket. Clinking at her side, Chris appeared as usual with his phone. "You were trending again last night." "Oh, new remix. They're calling it the borrowing anthem." I laughed for the first time in days. Later that week, I got a message from a teenager who watched the whole thing online. She'd saved up for her first kayak and said the story made her appreciate the line between sharing and stealing. That landed harder than I expected, because in the end, Stephanie didn't just steal a boat, she stole trust. Then taught everyone watching exactly why boundaries matter. Not every story needs a villain in a cape. Sometimes it's just someone with Wi-Fi, a phone, and way too much self-importance. And sometimes karma arrives not as thunder or flame, but in a Coast Guard boat cuffing you while the whole world watches.